In this lesson, we will cover running a cloudscape assessment and using Risc Networks Flex Deploy. Risc Networks Flex Deploy is a unique product that offers network analytics and cloud migration assessments, completely on-premises. None of your data leaves the facility where the assessment is taking place. We never collect sensitive information such as passwords, documents, email files, or database files. However, some enterprises have strict protocols that do not allow any data to leave their facility. Because of this, we have a process for running engagements on premises. Currently, we require downloading 2 separate virtual machines to complete a Flex Deploy assessment. You will be required to download the Flex Deploy appliance, as well as a Risc Networks RN150. We will go over some of the requirements for Flex Deploy and then explain how to get started. In order to run an on-premises assessment, our Flex Deploy virtual appliance and Risc Networks RN150 virtual appliance will have to make a few outbound SSL connections over a TCP port 443. This is required for authentication and orchestration of the appliance only. The first is orchestration.riscnetworks.com, which could be one of 2 IP addresses, 107.21.217.24 and 54.163.229.17. It is important to open access to both IP addresses. Next, you will need to open access to initial.riscnetworks.com, which is 23.21.177.128. If advanced troubleshooting is required, you will need to open access app1.riscnetworks.com at 50.17.235.104. The connections must have access through any firewall or content filter. It is also important to know proxies are not supported at this time. The Risc Networks Flex Deploy appliance is a virtual machine, so to run it, we will have to meet a few requirements. These requirements are access to VMware Player, VMware Workstation, or ESX Server, 4 virtual cores, 16 GB of memory, 1 TB of storage thick or thin provisioned. The Risc Networks RN150 has a few requirements that need to be met in order to successfully run. These requirements are access to VMware Player, VMware Workstation, or ESX Server, 4 GB of memory, however 8 GB are recommended, 50 GB of storage thick or thin provisioned. When you are ready to run an on-premises cloudscape assessment, the Partner Engagement Manager will email a download link, as well as a code for your Flex Deploy appliance. It is important to note that this link will only be available for 72 hours. Your download will be a zip file entitled risc_networks_flexdeploy.zip. Extract everything from the zip file and save the Risc Networks flexdeploy.ovf file in a safe place. I will quickly cover setting up the Risc Networks Flex Deploy appliance on VMware ESXi using vSphere client. Once you are in vSphere, select the host that you will deploy to. Go to File, select Deploy of Template. Browse to the template we saved earlier and select it. Review the OVF template details. Give your template a name and inventory location. Select your disk format. Review the ready-to-complete details. Check Power On after deployment. Then click Finish. Once the Flex Deploy appliance has been deployed, we can power it on. It may take a few seconds before we see the Risc Networks flash screen. During the boot process, the appliance will try to connect to your network using DHCP. If a DHCP lease is received, you will be redirected to the login page. This can take some time, and while you wait, you will see a blank screen. This is normal. If you are redirected to the network configuration page, follow the steps to assign a static IP address or troubleshoot DHCP. On the login screen, you will see the URL with the IP address of the appliance that you can type into a browser. Open a browser and type in this URL. You may get a message like this one that says, "This connection is untrusted." Just ignore that, and you will be redirected to a page that says, "Your pod has not been configured. Please go to the URL:8000 to configure your pod." Click this link. The first time you log into Risc Networks Flex Deploy appliance, you will have to accept the Risc Networks end-user license by reading through to the bottom of this box and checking the Accept EULA checkbox. Once you log in, you will be redirected to the Flex Deploy key input page. To initialize the Flex Deploy appliance, simply input the key that was given to you by your Partner Engagement Manager in the email with the download link. Click Verify Key Code. Please note, this process can take several minutes to complete. Once complete, the appliance will redirect to the configuration dashboard. When we reach the dashboard page, that means our appliance has been initialized. At this point, you can simply enter the IP address to this appliance and will be redirected to a login page for what looks like the Risc Networks portal. The only difference between this page and the Risc Networks portal is this is hosted in your environment. To create a new assessment, we will need our subscription code. If you do not have your subscription code, please contact your Partner Engagement Manager. Once you have it, under New Assessment, click Add. Click Yes, enter your subscription code, and click Get Started. Now it's time to add our assessment. We start by inputting the company name. Please keep in mind that this is not the name of your company, but the name of the company for whom you are writing the assessment. Next, we'll input the address, the city, the state, and the zip code. Once we verify all of our information is correct, we click Create Assessment. Once we have created the assessment, we will get a message letting us know the assessment has been created. We'll also be asked if we want to invite more people to this assessment. For now, we're going to click Not Now. Now we can see our new assessment on portal.riscnetworks.com. When we go back over to the Flex Deploy appliance, we'll notice it's not there yet. We'll have to move it from Portal to Flex Deploy, but to do that, we'll have to pull up Risc Networks RN150 appliance. To do that, we'll start by downloading the RN150 appliance from the link provided in our assessment. Now that we have our Risc Networks virtual appliance zip file downloaded, we can extract its contents and save it to a safe place. Once the file is done extracting, we will look specifically for the Risc Networks virtual appliance x64.ovf file. We will be using this for deployment. I'm going to quickly demonstrate deploying the RN150 virtual appliance on VMware Player. Just a reminder, the minimum requirements are 4 GB of memory, 8 GB recommended, and 50 GB of storage thick or thin provisioned. Once we're sure we're going to meet those requirements, we can click Open a Virtual Machine. Navigate to the location of our previously saved Risc Networks Virtual Appliance folder. Open the Risc Networks Virtual Appliance x64.ovf file. Name your virtual machine and select the storage path, and click Import. Now that we have deployed the Risc Networks RN150 virtual appliance, we can power it on. During the boot process, the appliance will try to access your network using DHCP. If the DHCP lease is received, you will be redirected to the login page. This can take some time, and while you wait, you may see a blank screen. This is normal. If you are redirected to the network configuration page, follow the steps to assign a static IP address or troubleshoot DHCP. Let's go ahead and try to connect. Simply click Play Virtual Machine. We'll wait a couple of seconds, and we should see a Risc Networks splash screen. Alright, and now it's trying to get an IP address via DHCP. We see a blank screen. Again, this is normal. This is part of the connection process. Alright, now we are redirecting to the Risc Networks login. Logging in is simple. First, we'll have to read and accept the Risc Networks end-user license agreement. Scroll your way through that, and we'll quickly checkmark the box that says Accept EULA, and we can enter our login credentials. Now, we should be able to log in. To make the bootstrap process easier, I type this URL into a browser where I am logged in. Once we successfully log in, we will be on the key page, which is where we start the bootstrapping process. In order to go through this process, we are going to need a couple of things. The first thing we'll need is our assessment code, and we'll also need the IP address of the FlexDeploy appliance we'll be connecting to. To get our assessment code, we'll go back to our assessment that we created and copy it here. So we'll go ahead and paste that in. Click Verify Key Code, and that may take a couple of seconds, but we should see a pop-up asking us if we will be using a FlexDeploy. We can click Yes and enter the IP address of our FlexDeploy appliance and click Test IP. This may take a moment, but our assessment has been created. And we are ready to get started. Before we move on with the bootstrap process, we may need to verify that our assessment has moved over to our FlexDeploy appliance and is no longer in portal.riscnetworks.com. To do that, we'll go back to portal.riscnetworks.com, and as you can see, we can still see that assessment. So we will refresh the screen, and that assessment is gone. And when we go back to our FlexDeploy appliance, we can see that it is here now. We verified that our assessment is in our FlexDeploy appliance within our network and not on portal.riscnetworks.com. Now, we can bootstrap the RN150 virtual appliance and start our assessment. Go right to the dashboard on our RN150 virtual appliance. Here, we see 8 different tabs: Interfaces, Assessments, Subnets, SNMP, Windows, VMware, Cisco Call Manager, and additional credentials. We will go through each of these tabs individually. Notice that the Interfaces tab and the Assessments tab have green checks next to them. This means we have successfully entered information into both of these categories and don't necessarily need to revisit these tabs. The next is Subnets. All of the tabs under Subnets are currently disabled. We cannot go any further until we enter information into the Subnets tab. Let's go through each tab and get a better understanding of what they are. Let's click the link on the Interfaces tab and go to the Interfaces page. This may take a couple of seconds. Notice the warning at the top of the page. It says, "The appliance is connected to Risc networks and functioning properly. If you make any changes, you could lose connection and prevent the assessment from functioning." This is because we were able to get a DHCP lease and connect to the Risc network's NOC or NOC for authentication and orchestration purposes only. Under our messages are 3 columns of information. The columns are Method, Interface Setting, and Status. Notice that status is OK. Because of this, we can move on to the next setup if we wanted to. Instead, we'll take a look at the Method column with a drop-down. Currently, DHCP is selected. Because it is selected, we can't edit the interface setting column. If we wanted to give this appliance a static IP, this is where we would do it. We would go to the drop-down and select Static. Now the fields on the interface setting column are configurable. For now, we will change it back to DHCP and go back to the dashboard. Next, we will review the Assessment tab. On the Assessment page, we are told our assessment has been created. From here, we can invite more users to the assessment if we wanted. This might be helpful if we wanted to show the information from the assessment to a coworker or manager. Some partners invite their customers as well. However, keep in mind, whoever is invited to an assessment has full access. Let's invite someone. And once we invite someone, we will get the message, "Successful." An invitation has been sent. We should return to the dashboard. Before we can move any further with our assessment, we are required to provide some subnet information. There are 2 ways to provide subnet information, and we will go through both. Click on the Subnets tab. The first step is to input the subnet information into the subnet text box. Select the correct subnet mask and click Add. We now see our subnet down here. It's checked to scan, and the status is scanning hasn't started. If we go back to the dashboard, you will notice that the rest of the tabs are now available. Go back to the Subnet tab. The second method available for populating the subnets is to populate from the routing table. To do this, we will click the Populate Routing Table button. You will notice that our options are either to use SNMP version 1 or 2 or SNMP version 3. We are going to use SNMP version 1. However, it is the same process for either version, except the credentials are slightly different. So we'll go ahead and put in our SNMP information. Click Populate. OK, it tells us 3 subnets were added, and 1 SNMP was tested and added. So we are good to go. When we do it this way, you will notice that these are not selected to scan. I'm actually going to deselect the first ones we put in, and select the ones that were populated from the routing table, and click Save. Let's go back to the dashboard. Notice both subnets and SNMP tabs now both have green check marks. This is because we supplied SNMP information and have populated the subnets from our routing table. Let's go to the SNMP page. I'm going to delete our SNMP string, so I can show you how to add SNMP credentials from this page. If you are using SNMP version 3, click the SNMP version 3 button and enter your credentials. We're using SNMP version 1, so I'm going to walk through the method to add SNMP credentials for versions 1 or 2. Enter an SNMP string and click Add. You will be prompted with a prompt that asks, do you want to test the SNMP credential? You can skip this. However, if there is something wrong with the credentials, network devices, virtual machines, and servers may not be discovered in the discovery process. We recommend testing and making sure your credentials pass, so before we click Test, let's verify that our IP address for our SNMP string is correct. We'll click Test, and this may take just a moment. OK, we got back the message, Test successful, and our SNMP string is read-only. Click OK, and let's go back to the dashboard. Next, we'll have to enter our Windows Server information. We have 4 fields: domain, username, password, and application socket collection. Before we enter our credentials information, I want to briefly cover application socket collection and what it means. Application socket collection, or information from NetStat, is used by the Risc Networks platform to provide a view of network dependencies. While dependency mapping does not rely on the collection of NetStat information, it can be utilized for a much more in-depth view of your workload and application interactions. Collection of NetStat information is an add-on component of the existing Windows Performance Information Collection. It utilizes the credentials already in place. No additional credential information is required. Now that we've covered application socket collection, it's time to enter some credentials. If you have a domain, you can enter that. However, we're going to skip that for now. Add a username, add a password, and we're going to select Enable, which we recommend. When you select Enable, you get this message prompting you. It says, are you sure you want to enable application socket collection? Once enabled, you will have to delete the associating credential to remove this feature. We're going to select Next, and we get another prompt for the workstation socket collection. It asks, do we want to enable the socket information collection off of Windows workstations as well? These will be pulled at a significantly lower frequency than the servers. Please see the Ops and Security Guide for more information. I want to click Enable, and we'll click Add. Verify that our IP address is correct, and click Test. This may take a moment. OK, we tested successful. And we see our credential, and we can go back to the dashboard. Let's add a VMware credential. This will be the same as adding the other credentials for the most part. We'll start with an ESX or vCenter IP address. And this is going to be on port 80, or whichever port yours is located. We're going to add a username and a password. Click Add, and it's going to ask us if we want to test the VMware credential, and we do. Again, we may enter something incorrectly. If we skip it, we may not get information for this device in our discovery process. So, we tested successful. We see our credential, and we can go back to the dashboard. Our next tab is for Cisco's Unified Communications Manager, or Cisco Call Manager. So we'll go in there and look. And it's looking for an IP address, username, and password. And this will be just like any of the other credentials. However, we're going to skip this one, and whenever we decide to skip a credential, we simply opt out. And then that way we can continue along with the bootstrap process. We've almost made it through the bootstrap process. We have one tab left, which is Additional Credentials. If we go in here, we can see that we have CLI. Right now, this is the only additional credential type we support. And we see Telnet or SSH. I'm going to go ahead and give this Telnet credential. And if you have a Telnet or SSH credential you would like to add, this is how you do it. Click Add. OK, once you click Add, it will prompt you whether or not you want to test your Telnet or SSH credential. Again, we always recommend testing the credential. This may take a moment, but we got the message back. Test successful. And here's our credential. OK, let's go back to the dashboard. We've entered and tested all of the credentials for which we want data. We've opted out of the ones that we don't, and Bootstrap is now at 100%. At this point, we click Start Assessment, and we'll be prompted to confirm our settings. Everything looks good, so we'll go ahead and click Start. This may take just a moment. And our assessment is running.